Good morning again. This is Dr. Mia Lueth. It's still 11/24/2022 U.S. Thanksgiving. I needed to address something, and I realized that my doctor's appointment stacked up on me next week. So I'm going to try and do it all so I can just be ready for all those appointments um, and labs. I did forget to mention uh, the term invisible warriors may not be familiar to certain people, and so I am doing as much educational type video as I can as well. If the video is listed as educational, it means that it's been well researched, and um, a lot of different thoughts and opinions and um, perspectives were seen before I actually say it out loud here. So everybody needs to know I am a doctor. I'm an educator, maybe, but trainer is more of the term because I prefer to take complex information and make it simple for those who need to use it that same day, because that's necessary sometimes. So, and I've developed educational materials as well. Uh, but there are people who are, walking around Earth who may seem physically okay, but they are not okay in a different way, either financially or emotionally or spiritually or some other way. And it's really important for a lot of people to understand some of the signs of what to look for people who may have a type of post-traumatic stress that is not long lasting, because you know part of the reason that there is such a category as lifelong post-traumatic stress is because some of us just fit in that category where what was known about it was not clearly and abundantly you know out there in the world for people to understand. So some of us got kind of caught in that middle pocket, and um, it does suck. But on the other hand, also means that there's more people who can explain and describe things easily to other people as to what really constitutes an invisible warrior. Um, Plenty of clergy fit in that category of varying different types and varieties. And children, um, it's best to notice these things in children as soon as possible so that you aren't putting them into a lifelong situation of it, which is definitely not okay for everyone. Um, for sure. But there are people who have been involved in fights, wars, accidents, you know, whatever, that or lost family or have had a situation where, you know, they're not altogether sure what kind of help they need or who to ask or what's really wrong sometimes, too. So the more people who can recognize some things, the more people who might be able to notice some things in people that you might interact with. Employees who work in certain companies, you know, if there's someone who just seems to be different in a way that's quite unusual for that person. Okay, that can be a sign right off the bat. So there are invisible warriors, and the issue is that many have all their arms and legs, and they don't appear to be, physically unwell. Okay, but not addressing the whole person has been an issue in this country for a long time, and that needs to be addressed because if someone's having some difficulty, grief and loss style, or has just got that temporary post-traumatic stress from an incident, needs immediate conversation and maybe medication, but at least needs to be free and open to tell someone, oh, this is how I feel, and I know I can do that right now. And I don't know what's wrong with me, but I'm afraid to get in the car, right? These things can happen, and it doesn't mean that a person is weak. It means that a person is just going through something. So, best case scenario when it comes to post-traumatic stress, at least in the US, is, well, do whatever we can to make it a temporary situation anyway, so that, it gets handled properly, and then it's not a lifelong situation. And that would be ideal for a next step. But there are a lot of people who are kind of in that category, and they may not know it, or people around them aren't aware of certain signs and symptoms of things may seem irrational to someone who's not going through it, but seem highly rational to someone who is. So more people who become aware of signs and symptoms of stress, trauma stress, in your own friends or just neighbors or wherever you may roam, kind of thing. A little more sensitivity to it will go a long way, because even just a regular average citizen who's not fully trained or anything, if someone's having an issue and you don't know what it is, best case here is try to make things quiet. But be careful about touching someone, because if they're in an altered state of mind, or they're having a flashback, or they're, struggling in a moment, it could, trigger them to react in a harmful way. I mean, it wouldn't really be a terrible issue, but just regular everyday people can be a little more sensitive to people around them that they see every day. And when loss happens, and depending on what it is, there should always be a way for any human to navigate that without added stress and pressure. That's the way it should be in the US anyway. But I do want to mention invisible warriors, because there's just plenty of them. And so some people are like, oh, if I ask for help, I'm like, you know what? If you don't ask for help, right, you could die, or you could accidentally take someone else out, because, right, you just stopped caring about your life and started doing more and more, yes, reckless things. So it's another reason why I think that the U.S. government should have a panel of people. I'm not really sure who, I don't know, but who are going over dishonorable discharges and making sure that during a certain period of time in U.S. history where maybe post traumatic stress was not as well recognized and easy to discern, um, I'm sure that there have to be at least a few military personnel who were dishonorably discharged, but likely some activities while on duty could have occurred because of, you know, some only knew to go home and drink. You see what I'm saying? I mean, we know better now, which is good news, right? But there's still that. And so that old style thinking needs to go away, everybody. You're not processing it properly if you don't understand that there has to be a few military personnel who were dishonorably discharged. Yes, because of events that occurred while in service and started to, you know, cause issues in regular everyday duty. And there has to be a few. So anyone's got extra money or anyone's got any pool or any military personnel, you know, that would be a panel of people just to go over all of the, like Vietnam era and Korean era. And yeah, I'm sure there has to be a few fit in that little bubble there who likely would not have gotten a dishonorable discharge if they weren't affected by an on duty in service traumatic event or events. Um, so, former military or people who have some say, that's worth time and money right there. Even if you just find one, because, back benefits and other things, it's important. And it's important for all U.S. citizens to at least be aware that you might be talking to an invisible warrior. And so some people's sensitivities, might change or seem irrational, but it may just be as a result of trying to cope and maybe not having as many resources as there are available now today. But try to advocate for yourself. I know it's harder for other people than it is for some others, right? Because somebody needs to know. You see what I'm saying? Like, somebody needs to know that you're, scared of something you weren't scared of, or you can't handle loud noises right now until, right, coped and built up some. You have to try and get that out though too. But I know there have to be a few U.S. military service personnel who were, given dishonorable discharges, but likely the behavior stemmed from traumatic incident in service. And so I think that's fair to ask of the State Department, the U.S. government, the military, and others who run the VA and everything else to at least have somebody rechecking some of them, especially Vietnam and Korean. Um, Well, World War One, World War Two, there aren't that many left, but also if they're still around, they've probably managed to get the right help somehow. But it was probably a whole lot harder for them. And so that's something that needs to be looked at. And it's fair to ask because of what's known about stress and traumatic events can cause erratic behavior, which could lead to, dishonorable, right, on making someone unfit or, right, okay. So that's why I mentioned the term invisible warriors, because some people may not understand what that means. But every day, if you're out and about, or even if you watch TV or movies, you likely set eyes on somebody who is an invisible warrior. And there are times when it's hard to get up out of bed or open the curtains or take a shower or really give a crap because you just can't anymore. When the harder people push those, the faster they die. So somebody wants to push me, you're going to have to come and do it in person. That's one of the things that I have to get across. So anyone who does know me and happens to see this particular video, alive or dead, it'll be here, right? But, I have the right to pretty much say, okay, well, I'm willing to go to these doctors, okay, but the rest of this is crap. And I need medical people to understand that. And just regular people to understand that. My life is unfortunately limited in certain ways. And, I'm aware of certain challenges so I can prepare for them, which is good news. And for me, anyone who does have post traumatic stress and you've been diagnosed with it, and it's kind of new, or you know someone or you love someone who has been diagnosed with it, quiet is usually a very good option most of the time. So even if you're not, you could just be a regular person. You could at least try to, turn off music or try and let someone sit in your car where it's quiet or whatever. I mean, quiet is usually best case that any regular person can at least try to do. But for me, it's like I said, I'm grateful for the fact that I pushed myself as an athlete when I was younger. Because but the way my mother was, I mean, I could understand where she was coming from in some ways. She would tell me that she didn't want to be, so pushy and shovey like some of the other swimming and soccer parents were with their kids, right? Fine. But she was like that academically, worse than most people's parents I've ever met. So, yeah, I had so much academic pressure on me. It's probably why I've had issues in my life, while at least my mother was alive. People find out you're a genius and they think that you can make them rich, or, right, you can make gold for them, or you can, produce miracles. And I'm so tired of that I just don't really want to communicate with people anymore. Many of them, anyway. And they're geniuses who are invisible warriors walking around. They usually get shit on because others don't quite understand. And then they, oh, you think you're better than me, and all the other bullshit that you all people project and transfer onto others. Well, you can't do that to me. It is not possible to project onto me. Okay? You can't. A lot of people will talk to me about certain things and this and that, and I'm like, well, those are all characteristics of you and characteristics you don't like. They're not my characteristics. Right. And I've had people just assume that all people are exactly the same and they're going to do everything exactly the same. And after a while, some of us, well, we don't want to fucking talk to any of you anymore because I'm not exactly the same as anybody on this planet. And not everybody's a shithead. And not everybody's a gold digger. And not everybody's out to, like get the better of you and cause you issue. It's too much of that crap. People need to work on the paranoia all over the planet immediately. But in the US, I think it's fair. Yeah, especially Vietnam era and Korea era service people. Likely a few in that mix for sure. He got dishonorable discharge, conduct unbecoming, but likely that conduct occurred because a traumatic event was causing some, trauma. Even physically, it can cause trauma in your brain. It's like getting hit with a blunt object. Is the effect that it has on the human brain. Even though you haven't been hit with a blunt object, you still have the brain damage. So post-traumatic stress is actually brain damage, people. And it does cause physiological changes. So it is important that everyone kind of learn to recognize a few little things and be just a little more sensitive around other people who seem maybe they're not acting the same, or they don't seem to be recovering. Don't just walk away. Well, they don't want help. And no, wrong. Walk away from me. So it's important. And, there's a lot of research on it. But I've been walking around with the equivalent of blunt force trauma. And a lot of people have been treating me like shit. And I want to know why immediately. No, you don't treat women like shit. Well, and some fucking, hell bitch from the last rung will get you, and I got nothing but encouragement for that hell bitch. So just keep that in mind. Anybody gets diagnosed with post-traumatic stress, be a little more gentle. But remember, you don't necessarily have to walk on eggshells. You just have to recognize that some of the things maybe they can handle, not right now. You see what I'm saying? And post-traumatic stress is one of those kind of things that you don't just wake up the next day and it's cured. And I would appreciate if some people would understand that. I've been walking around with the equivalent of blunt force trauma. And leave me the fuck alone. If you can't be good about it. Everybody have a good Thanksgiving. If you're U.S., once a day. It helps, especially for those who are like me and kind of are indoors more often, right? The reason that I have to spend so much time indoors is, well, I'm just not well enough to travel by myself anymore. It's just the way it is, and I have to plan uh, a little more rigorously than some other people. But that's why I don't go to concerts or do any of those things because, well, I mean, even if I had money, I still wouldn't be able to go. Okay, like, you know, it's rather money independent in that fashion, but I don't have a choice. So, um, I just want everybody to know what that term means, especially in the U.S. First responders, people just got a divorce, just right. There's so many things that can happen, and the ability to cope, may not be there right away. So we should all be looking out for each other. So take care, everybody.